We'll call this. I know. We were just going to get started. We can't get the camera to work. Okay.
Success.
Elementary, my dear Watson. That's great. All right, so now we'll call this North Kootenay Lake Services Committee meeting to order at 11:07. The Indigenous Land Acknowledgement. Oh, there it is. So we're called to order. So we acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whose traditional lands we are meeting today. Motion to adopt the agenda unless there's any late items.
So moved with just the question if we want to include the letters related to the Handy Dark service just as part of the package for the public, or
should it have been included beforehand because they can't see it? We can discuss it because it's an agenda item, but maybe could we just add them to the next meeting? Like we'll discuss them today, but add them for information to the next meeting, or how should we do that? Because the public hasn't seen those letters.
Yeah, exactly. I think actually we can discuss it. I just wanted to check in with you. And then I would actually recommend they go to the West Transit Services Committee as information so they can be received on that agenda. So I'm good with this agenda.
All right. Those in favor? Motion's carried. So it's just the two of us. All right, and the minutes have been received, so if there's no errors or omissions, we will just proceed. All right, so to do business. So the first is transit services. And welcome, Tom. Let's see you on there. And so we've had requests from members of the public for expanded service of the paratransit for Castle. Currently there is Friday service, and there's requests from a couple of different people and organizations for expanded service. So Tom, did you want to speak to that at all?
I think his sound isn't working.
No. Okay, so how do we want to manage that?
I think it's on his end.
Yeah. Okay.
He's unmuted, but
Try again. Give them a moment to try logging in again. Maybe what we'll do then is go to our next agenda item, which is the search and rescue lease. And it just says discussion item, and I have no details on that.
I'll introduce it because I think it was, it's a long-standing issue. The reason why I wanted us to discuss it at this table is because it's been one that has pretty much rested with the chiefs, depending on who was in that role. So Chief Graham has been involved in it. And then I think Chief Feist has been involved somewhat. But there's a long-standing need for shared use agreements in terms of the physical space at the fire hall. So the only discussion I really wanted to entertain today is how do we move that forward and move it out of one-on-one discussions between either the SAR manager asking for something or it going through the fire chief, and there's no documentation of like, we really need shared use agreements at that hall. So that's why I wanted at this table, and just to seek guidance from Chief Feist and Chief, not Nick, excuse, about the best process to move that forward, what they might need from us. That's kind of what I was wanting to do.
Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, well, thank you, Mayor and Director. Yeah, currently I'm new to, and I'm just trying to see what's in place and what we have existing. And my understanding is there's no lease agreement in place. And you know, I think search and rescue has expanding needs. Certainly fire has expanding needs in that we're getting a new vehicle coming, and we're just, I think it's a really good idea that we can clarify space and just be very clear on space and use. So I would certainly welcome the discussion for sure. Chief, Mike.
Yeah, through the chair, what Chief Scoos mentioned there is accurate. There has been situations in the past where a new vehicle has shown up in the fire station without any consultation or discussion with the fire chief at the time. And so it would be good to have something in place that has a process and clearly defines what's being stored and where things are being stored and how we're looking after that for sure.
Go ahead, Director Watson.
So in terms of like, this is really an operational need. It keeps ending up political, which is kind of why I wanted to hear. Would the best process at this point then be just a motion from this table directing staff to work on and establish a shared use agreement with search and rescue? Is that the best action we should take?
Through the chair, I agree it is. Chief Scoos.
Yes, yeah, I agree as well.
Okay. So if that, I would make that motion, Chair, and then just put it into the operational realm of things.
Okay. As long as there is the understanding that both entities will be housed, right? We're not pushing search and rescue out. It's just establishing who needs what space and accommodating both, and anything additional needs beyond what's physically available in the fire hall will be a separate process. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, my hope is that we have a clear understanding and space and use agreement, and that just works better for interagencies, discussions, and things like that. So.
Right. So do you want to, or had you provided that at all to Christine, or?
Terrible at that. I can do it now if you would like.
All right, unless, Christine, were you able to capture the essence of what Director Watson was wanting?
Yes, I think I did. Yeah, just direction to staff to discuss the shared lease agreement ultimately with the two parties.
I'll just amend that to say that that Fire Services works with Castle Search and Rescue to establish a shared use agreement that outlines space needs, equipment needs for current use. And I would leave it there, and then I'll comment afterwards on the long-term needs.
Right. So that is the motion, and any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Motion is carried.
But a comment on long-term needs?
Yes.
So I did suggest too, I had met with former Chief Graham, and I know he had also met with council, so I felt like we also shared each other's conversations, because again, I don't want to distinguish the difference between when it comes to council, that's great. But what we had talked about was the fire hall itself needs more space. Search and rescue is now adding a building, which is great because it'll help decrease the pressure on the hall. But within the next 10 to 15 years, especially with increasing requirements under the Fire Safety Act, increasing requirements under EDMA, we should know Emergency Support Services uses the building, that there is a need for a longer term outlook on the needs of the building. And I think that that also needs to be put into planning, not on an immediate level, but on a long-term level that looks at like this, the footprint of the lot can accommodate more space, but what is the best way to do that? And what are those long-term needs that would feed into possible expansions and needs? So I just wanted to highlight that because you addressed current needs, and it's really important to address it. We know a 10 to 15 year outlook is going to be a smart thing to do in advance of being out of space. And right. So I don't know if that's something you would want to put into a motion at this point, just to say the directors support that, or if you want to wait.
Well, unless it's a subsequent motion, then when they're meeting to discuss the lease, that they discuss future needs at the same time with both organizations and what they see. And then, because they're in the best position to walk the site and see where things could be placed. If search and rescue is putting a building up, is it going to be an impediment to expanding the current building to meet needs? So I think the lot needs to be looked into, and if it's determined that there are more space requirements, like of land, then it's a separate discussion with the village to ensure that that happens. So if we're looking 10 to 15 years down the road, we should look at it all at the same time when they're meeting, rather than having that be it is a separate process, but not a separate process.
Yeah, they feed into each other. Can I ask you a question, Chief Faced? Chief, I'm just curious if the where an asset management plan for the fire hall is at, and would this discussion would it coincide with the asset management review?
Through the chair, I think the asset management plan is still with AJ with planning, or project management, sorry. That is something that Chief Scoos and I can look into future planning and needs for the department. There was discussion at one point whether we needed to look into an aerial or ladder apparatus, which would be a longer apparatus. Right now, based on NFPA, so National Fire Protection Association standards and fire underwriter survey, the community doesn't need that need. But depending on the development of the community in the future, there might be a need for that down the road, and that would be a longer, larger apparatus.
Good.
All right. And I guess the other question is, are we leaving it to the fire department staff to reach out to KSAR for that longer planning piece? Or should we, as the regional district, as the shared services, indicate that we've been said to start having those conversations, rather than fire having to go say, well, we're going to plan the next 10 to 15, but when you actually don't have the authority to do so, we would have to tell them that we've encouraged them to work together on that, or is it?
Well, I know the short-term shared use lease agreement has been something that both SAR and, depending on the chief at the time,
think
talking about the longer term.
Yeah.
It's a good question. Do you need support from us to include SAR in that discussion? I mean, SAR and emergency support services are participants in the use of that building. So when you're looking at the long-term asset management and use, are you naturally going to include them? Or do you need direction from us to please include the other users in the building?
Through the chair, that's a good question. I might have to get back to you on that one, whether we need direction for that or not.
All right, now I see your hand up, Stuart. Go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, I don't think we need direction, but it might help because it seems like SAR tends to go to the elected officials before they start talking to staff. And I think it's a good direction from the committee to say, look, you're welcome to go talk to Chief Scoos or Chief Feist if there's an issue going on, especially if it's operational. The elected officials don't need to get in the middle of it. So I think that direction just could help staff.
Director Watson?
Yeah, just to clarify, everything that the search and rescue has brought to me was already initiated with the chief. They were giving me the FYI in case there was something needed. And I think because the chiefs have changed over, it just hasn't had the traction it needed, which is why it got to this table. But I think even speaking with Chief Scoos, he works with the SAR managers quite a bit. And it seems like there's good communication. So I just wanted to make sure it's not that they're not speaking to the chief directly. They've just changed. So it's been hard to track.
Okay. So what kind of motion would you like us to make, Stuart? formalize that.
I think this could really just be a documented direction to staff on the minutes. I'm not sure you need a formal motion.
All right.
The direction of staff that when discussing long-term use needs, that search and rescue and emergency support services are included in your discussions. That work?
Yeah.
Does that work, Chief and Chief?
It works for me. Just the way, the more we have a formal process, I think it will be clearer and less open to interpretation. So,
Great. Any other discussion on that topic?
I don't think so. I'll note that we are trying to see if I can give Community Works to search and rescue for their new building. So Mike is working on that one, but that's separate, but just FYI for the village. Yeah.
Right. So then we will jump back up to transit services and we'll see whether we can hear you, Tom.
Respectfully through the chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
All
you now.
right.
Thank you.
My apologies about that. I was switching around some stuff, and between my Bluetooth headset and my phone and everything else, it canceled everything out.
Thank you.
thank you.
See you. All right. So we have had several items of correspondence requesting expanded transit service for Castle Area D, but specifically more so Castle for the paratransit service. And I think you've been copied on all of those letters. Did you get the most recent piece of correspondence from the Victorian Hospital Auxiliary Society?
Respectfully through the chair, yes, I did.
Okay. All right. So then in your opinion, Tom, where can we go with this? We can support it, but it's also got to be supported by budget and by BC Transit.
Yes. Respectfully through the chair, I just got back from Victoria and some meetings with BC Transit, the provincial government, Ministry of Transportation, about the future of public transit across the province. And there were some general themes. The first theme, of course, being there's not a lot of money out there, particularly from a provincial standpoint. My recommendation in addressing any sort of moving forward would be that it would be cost and hour neutral. So, maybe the service participants want to consider, and I'll use this as an example, on the Tuesday trip is the one trip a week that runs directly from Caslow all the way through to Nelson. The other trips actually go from Caslow to Balfour, meet at number 10, people take a transfer. So that additional Balfour to Chaco-Mica Mall trip actually adds about a half an hour onto that day. If the service participants were interested, we could actually potentially move that half an hour into a more local service on the 5758. Or we could use that service on the front end to provide handy dart or paratransit services in the community. So instead of everybody having to file down to a central leaving point, the bus could do an on-request service loop through town, pick people up, and then move them through to the transfer point at Balfour. Now, I would want to have a meeting or two in the community first to have a discussion about this and see where it lands. I think it's probably a more efficient use of hours. Looking at, because again, there are 2 trips a week coming down from Caslow Area D to the Balfour, 2 trips a day. So there's 1 trip that leaves in the morning, 1 trip that leaves at lunch, and then 1 trip that leaves later in the day. So actually 3. And it may be a question to, a matter of discussion within the community, if the community wants to go to 2 trips for a day and then reallocate some of those hours within the community for more localized services. I do think there's a reasonable amount of service here. I'm not sure that everybody utilizes all those trips, but again, this would be something that I would want to talk to community members first before putting together a formal proposal. There is a plan to come out to Caslow and meet with residents of Caslow and Area D with the operator and BC Transit in the near future here. We're trying to line that up for August, September. And I'm sure these things will be a matter of discussion then. Not to go on too long, but I also wanted to point out a couple things to the committee. A little bit around ridership numbers. I know the committee is always interested in ridership numbers. These are unfiltered numbers, so that means there's errors found in this data. Sometimes passenger counters did not turn on. People are getting used to the new UMO system, so these numbers should be considered on the low side. But on the number 57, we had 172 rides in 2024. On the number 58, we had 171 rides on the 54, and the 76 did 2,079 rides. And I'm going to say again, these numbers are low. So when you look at the combined cost of Kaslo and Area D, you can break it out roughly into about $25 a ride. I think we can improve that, and I think we should set a target for around $18 a ride. I think that would be a very reasonable number for a rural transit system. And I think when you consider $18 a ride for what you're getting out of it as a community, people getting to shopping, people getting to services, people socializing, seniors being able to get to the facilities that they need, the integration of maybe handy dart transit into that, I think that would be a laudable goal.
Any comments?
Sure do. So first one, Tom, just on the, so I have three. Okay. So on the community meetings, if we could please get BC Transit to give us as much heads up as possible on those so we can participate if it aligns. So it's a quick one. To me, there's two requests. One is increasing handy dart within the community. The second is the efficiency and the connections to the medical needs, such as all the way to trail. And when we heard, like, on certain days, you have to stay overnight or you got a 5-hour wait. So I would say for the more immediate one, and I really appreciate they'll talk to the community, the handy dart increased needs within the community we know is now needed. So I would more than support ways to see how we could do that. The second one, the work to improve the connections to medical appointments, I would love to see how we can improve those connections in conjunction with IHA increasing what they support, because we can't lose sight, and I don't think you and I will do this, nor will Tom, that the centralizing of services is what we're subsidizing now and having to pick up more and more. And being able to track that is very difficult. So I say that number 2 is very much essential, but I think it's a bigger piece, and I don't see that being immediate, but I would absolutely support how do we increase the connection so people with medical appointments aren't stuck places needing to plan something else. Like, that's just the worst thing in a medical situation. And on a more immediate level, seeing how we can increase handy dart services within the community, knowing we have a couple that are needing it sooner than later. That would be my input.
Okay. Go ahead, Tom.
Respectfully on the chair, I do have a very quick update on the IHA Health Connections funding, and they've been making some very real progress in the negotiations around getting that funding up to adequate levels. We saw a small increase this year, but it is the first increase since 2021, so that's exciting, and they are continuing to negotiate on our behalf with IHA to bring those numbers up to fund about 2,000 hours of health connection, which would be a substantive lift. So looking forward to that, but I will prioritize handy dart services within the community and the movement from paratransit to handy dart for a couple hours. We're going to evaluate the needs there, and then we'll look at the reallocation of some hours to attempt to provide better connectivity to medical health services.
Supplemental more. So the one thing that did come up, and of course you walk through town and you have these conversations. One was noting that we're meeting with the hospital board this week, which you're a chair of. You're not. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. You will be up. Two things on that was I did suggest to the public who engaged me on it that they do come to public time for the hospital board, because I think the health connections is a really big piece, and it's important for IHA to know it's not just us, which they should know, but whatever. The second piece too, that was perhaps we forward those letters as part of correspondence at the hospital board as well, specifically because they're health related. So that's more so to my colleague here. If you agree, we can just forward those to. Right.
No, Christine can do it. To Christine, who then forwards through Tom, maybe.
Okay.
Because you've been filtering, you've been getting all the correspondence as well. Then it just then we don't have to filter through, if that would be possible. And since Christine is also going to be the admin for the hospital board meeting.
Respectfully through the chair, what I'll do is we'll just set up a default route, and when hospital related or medical related transit services come up, we're just going to route those straight through to the hospital board meeting as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I did, transit was one of the priorities that we were going to address down at UBCM. But for when the MLAs are there on Thursday night, I've actually made it one of the questions for them. So, hopefully, and I haven't talked to CAO Baker about it, but, maybe doing the delegation at UBCM from the village, because that it has come through us. And it's Castle residents that are mostly the ones that are making those requests. So, go ahead, Tom.
And just for your notes at UBCM, just something to note. It was really noted a lot in the meetings when I was in Victoria. It is no longer the Ministry of Transportation. It is the Ministry of Transportation and Transit. So transit planning, transit is now at the highest level. It's as though there is transit and then all other transportation. That's the level of focus that they are now trying to put into public transit across the province. It's a sort of a seismic shift in a way, and I'm not sure that some of our colleagues at the Ministry of Transportation and Transit are altogether making the adjustment yet, but that adjustment is coming.
Well, hopefully that will help.
I suspect it will.
Right.
So do we need a motion to acknowledge that we would like to see handy dart services increased in Caslo? No.
Respectfully through the chair, I'll do the legwork as a part of upcoming service deliberations that are coming, as apportionment wraps up. And then that information I'm doing this kind of work for everybody right now. So I don't think it requires specific direction. We have enough on paper that we know that this is something that Caslo is very excited about.
It would be good for us to have a note in the minutes, though, that we recognize the need and staff is taking steps to see what can be done. Because if people are looking at the minutes, they might want to know that we have given due consideration to their input and their requests.
Yeah.
Respectfully through the chair, similar to Stuart's response, it doesn't require a resolution necessarily, but should definitely be kept in the notes.
Yeah. All right.
Good stuff.
All right. Thank you. You can stay for if you want, or you can sign off if you want, Tom. Your choice.
I was away for most of last week, and so I have several fires burning.
Not a good time for
the fire guys have left the room, so I should probably go join them dealing with some fires. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. All right. So our next discussion item is the McDonald Creek contract update. And who do we have in between the screens?
It's Chris.
Okay, Chris. I wasn't sure who was addressing this one.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Through the chair, just here to provide you a brief update on the contract renewal process for McDonald Creek Water System. Give you a real quick background on how the system became an RDCK service. In 2002, May of 2002, there was a landslide that damaged McDonald Creek intake structure and part of the distribution system. That required that area to connect to the Village Caslo water system to provide water. In 2007, the RDCK and the Village of Caslo entered into a water service agreement. That agreement, among other things, defines ownership, respective responsibilities, how operations and maintenance are to be handled, billing, fee collection, the number of connections, regulatory reporting, insurance, and dispute resolution for the most part. That agreement ends December 31st of this year. So we've been working internally with our DCK staff as well as Village of Caslow on the wording of that new agreement. For the most part, this is a housekeeping items, but there was a number of items in that previous agreement that we wanted to rewrite. So we are currently in that process. We've been working with our DCK staff to leverage our new templates and getting guidance from Mike Morrison and team on what that looks like. Future work on this will be meeting with the Village of Caslow just to iron out any of the remaining details in that agreement, answer any questions, and make any changes as needed. Certainly here to answer any of your questions on that.
Do you have anything?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So first off, I would love a report that outlines everything you just said. I have no paperwork on this at all, so it's just really, I don't even know the agreement, so it'd be good to understand that. I know it just more from, when we do the annual budget, getting the updates from Lily on how it works. So I'd appreciate anything that we could receive on an agenda that would be the report you just provided, that it ends, and then are there going to be changes that incur significant increases to, I know that utilities is through the village, so that one, in terms of operational, they handle that, but in terms of capital and what we do for the parcel tax and the rate per thousand, if there's going to be any changes that drastically affect that, I need to get ahead of that quite a bit, and we need to make sure we're engaging the residents on it. So that timeline is, and changes, I would want as much notice on as possible. I did get quite a few questions on McDonald Creek this year, mostly because I think residents get two bills and they didn't understand that. And so I just let them know, like, this is how it works. So they're paying more attention to it, which is great, but I don't have a background knowledge. So those would be the things I'm looking for. And at this moment, if you are aware of any big changes to the agreement that will affect the users, it'd be great to get a heads up on those.
Yeah, through the chair, short answer, no, I don't see any big changes here. We've got a fairly new distribution system that, of course, the RDCK owns. Like all other water systems, we have an asset management plan for those works that identifies required reserve contributions, both in the short and long term. As far as other charges, upgrade charges, and things like that may crop up in the future. There's wording in the draft agreement that speaks to that. I can certainly provide you with a written summary of what I've presented today, and then answer your questions that you just posed now.
One quick follow-up.
Yeah.
Thank you. In the report, if you're able to, and I hope this would be in your records because it would be several people previous to you. Can we document any of because I had a bunch of pushback when I went to offer a grant because there was supposed to be this historical, like, one-time only grant. And I'm like, well, water systems take a lot more than that. So if there's any way to document what has been provided as grants through Area D, and that we won't limit that. It'll be on a case-by-case basis. I think I did provide some community works a couple of years ago. And I don't want us to be in any way adhering to previous, political statements. I want to be amenable to. And so the documentation of what we've provided beyond just the service capital availability is helpful to show that, yes, we do this ongoing and it's iterative to the needs. I don't know if that made sense. I think that made sense.
Yeah, through the chair, I can dig through our records and see what we provided historically and provide that summary.
Okay, thanks.
And I'm going to throw some stuff in that have arisen as issues. First is the number of connections. I know that what we're currently at, what was approved, and if there's to be an increase in the number of connections, we need to make sure that we have adequate capacity in the Village of Caslow, and that it's clearly people are aware that there is going to be additional connections available, because it sounded like people weren't happy with the process that was undertaken back in, 2025 to 2027 when the agreement was finalized. So there are people who subdivided their properties since the connections were granted, and they only got one connection, but now they've subdivided and selling lots with no legal connections available. So that's a concern of mine. And in that same vein, there were at minimum 2 illegal connections, people, adjacent property owners, allowing lines to be taken from their property to a neighboring property. And so I would want to see something in there that there is a financial penalty for that, because that's unacceptable to me, right? And because there's cross-contamination issues with that. And that's the advantage or disadvantage of having somebody who's got a long memory and dealt with these things. So, and just a general question, when a building permit is applied for in the McDonald Creek area, is it a matter of course for the building inspection department to ascertain whether there is a valid connection allotted to that property? And if not, we should not be granting a building permit, because then that gives the impression that all is good and they can proceed, and they get to that point and they say, the village won't give me water. So then we don't look good. But if I'm assuming that there will be added connections negotiated in this new contract. And I'd actually like to see a line item for asset management dollars to go to the village rather than dealing with it on a one-off, because McDonald Creek is essentially part of our system now, and they should be, maybe not paying the exact same amount as municipal residents because we've got our in the ground, but for the plant, that there should be money that goes into a municipal reserve rather than it being dependent on the generosity and the willingness of the current director to cost share in projects that do benefit the residents of McDonald Creek in that area. Those are my things.
Sure, through the chair, speak to a couple of those things. We've got a line item that addresses your illegal connection or your confirmation of connection request that specifically speaks to requiring the building official to confirm that there is a legal connection there, and to not authorize a building permit if there's not. We also have language in the draft agreement that speaks to Village of Caslow capital needs in the future, things like water treatment plant upgrades, both legislatively required or growth required, or just state of good repair required. So I think we've spoken to that. I can summarize that in a written response to you as well.
Director Watson.
Yeah, Chris, I'm just curious. So when we have an illegal connection on one of our systems, the process is quite rigid. So if there's an illegal connection that is discovered on the McDonald Creek system, do our regulations apply to that? Because there would be a fine involved and there would be impact. So how is that? I know we have rules in place for that, but with this system, how does that work?
Yeah, I will have to dig through the details a bit. I do think that we've got language in our bylaw that does speak to that as well. It depends on what the nature of the issue is. There's also, of course, Village of Caslow water utility fees and charges bylaw that speaks to that as well. But I can provide a summary of enforcement related responsibilities and steps in my written report to you.
Okay. Supplement to that, I think if it would be I'll leave it to the staff, but whoever needs to enforce, we got to make sure that our bylaws are connecting to each other so that one of us doesn't end up in that, like, oh, we can't enforce this because it's actually their asset, or vice versa, it's on their area D land. So whatever that does to make sure enforcement is enforceable, super important.
Yeah, through the chair, that's actually an item that we're currently in discussion with Mike Morrison here, just ironing out any details, and we'll potentially get a legal opinion on that as part of this work as well.
Great. All right. Do you have anything to add, Robert?
Hey, Chris, it's Robert here with the village. Do you know when a meeting might occur between the village and RDCK? Do you guys have a timeline?
I'd imagine in the next probably 6 weeks, we'd look to that. I'm ironing out a couple of things, like I said, with Mike Morrison here to answer a couple of questions and make sure that we've got a draft agreement that's answered all of our questions. And then, yeah, seek to have a meeting with you, like I said, in the next 6 weeks or so.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chris, for those updates and for the answers. We'll both watch for things to move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, and our next and last item before public time is just an update on Imagine Kootenay. So the entity that Imagine Kootenay has engaged to replace the previous management they had applied for a grant for this year and were successful in getting an ETSI-BC grant. And when we discussed it, the goal was to try and increase the membership, attract back some of the communities that had left the program, and offer them for this next season, the 25-26, a free membership. But also in that, they were going to grant free membership to everybody who's a participant in the program. So I'm assuming that we have not gotten an invoice for 25-26, and our budgeted amount was $2,000, and we were going to have them act as our first point of contact because we had no interest from anyone to act in that capacity. So just an update that if there is an invoice, and you'll probably have heard this from Director Jackman as well, because he's also a participant in that. So just to, it'd be interesting to know if we had gotten an invoice yet. I suspect not, but just a heads up.
Through the chair, not for 2025, that's for sure. I actually had to follow up because I realized in February of this year that we hadn't been invoiced for 2024. So I had to email the contact at the Columbia Valley Chamber of Commerce to actually get them to send the invoice. So I guess they're too busy to deal with the administrative side of things. So I'm not quite sure when the 2025 invoice will come in.
Well, just saying it probably won't, because of this grant and them pursuing, trying to increase the membership and show the value. So there's another organization so it's going to be taken off of the plate of Tom Thompson at the Nelson Chamber, because he was doing part of it, and then the Columbia Valley Chamber was doing the other part of it. So now it's resting with a coordinator. And that's just happened. And like I said, successfully got the grant. So we haven't had an Imagine Kootenay meeting for a while, but I suspect we'll have one in the next few months to update us on what's going on with the grant and progress on that front. So, and that was it.
So through the chair, I might reach out to them just to it'd be nice to get an invoice that just had a credit on it and it was zeroed out so we could have it for our documents, because if we don't get an invoice in 2025 and we don't get an invoice until the end of 2026, I think it might start to confuse people in terms of what's happening if there's no paper trail. So I might reach out just to get them to invoice with a credit related to the grant, $0 invoice, and that way we can at least file it away.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So that does bring us to public time at 11:15. Are there any members of the public that have questions for us this morning? We've got here's one member of the public. So if you have a question, you can unmute and ask your question. There to be no questions. So our next meeting is scheduled for August 18th at 10 a.m. A motion to adjourn, 11:51. Okay.
So moved.
All those in favor? Motion's carried.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody.
Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.